me, help me welcome to the podium Mr. Elijah Williams, the Executive Director of the Energy Corridor District, where he leads efforts to shape economic development, transportation, infrastructure, public safety, and urban design initiatives in one of Houston's most important business centers. His goal today is to help us reimagine the Energy Corridor. Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, I like that. Good to be with you all today. We appreciate the invitation to join you and participate in this forum. My name is Elijah Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Energy Corridor, one of the larger job centers in the Houston area, and home to what I like to say is all things energy. So I want to spend some time today, talk a little bit about what the Energy Corridor actually is, our Reimagining the Energy Corridor process, as well as our long-term friendship with Addicks and Barker Reservoir, and just our commitment to continued good quality flood control infrastructure that supports development and growth of this region. So I'll hop right in. So Energy Corridor, ultimately we are a special district, very similar to what you would see at a central business district, downtown Houston or other places. And so we were created in 2001 and we foster economic growth. The way I generally put what we do as an organization is we create an environment, right? We create an environment that's conducive to economic growth, job creation, and really just the overall betterment of community. The map that you see here outlines what we call the boundaries of the Energy Corridor. It also shows a variety of land uses in the Energy Corridor, most of which will be commercial office space, some retail, definitely multifamily, lots of single family homes as well, medical, so on and so forth. So essentially a good variety of land uses are available in the district, as well as quite a bit of vacant and available land for development is there as well. And one of the most glaring things as well, you can see the presence of both Addicks and Barker, and how the district really sits at the confluence of both of those bodies. Essentially, how we do our work as an organization, I tend to say we focus on these 5 core elements. So everything from advocacy, economic development, marketing work, beautification, being sure the place looks good, ensuring we have good quality infrastructure that's planned over time, ultimately trying to create an identity for the area, as well as a commitment to public safety and security, as well as transportation and mobility. And so those are the 5 key areas that we tend to focus our work in as we work across really the city, county, and state, and of course even the federal level, interacting with various public agencies and entities. A couple of facts about the Energy Corridor. As of the 2020 Land Use Demographics Report we did, approximately about 56,000 jobs. That number probably needs to be updated based on the new census data that recently came in. But bulk of those jobs are centralized around what I, again, say all things energy. And so quite a big concentration of employment in this space, which again helps to drive the Houston economy. Variety of businesses, about 2,500 with various focuses. And again, as I alluded to, great opportunity for continued development within the district that still exists. On the right here, you can see that as Houston continues to grow, population center continues to shift, and we are at the forefront of that thing. And so we're present, what I like to say, right between where people lay their heads and where people want to work. And so it's a really good position for us to be as development continues over time. You can see some of our major employers present, everyone from Shell, BP, ConocoPhillips, some of the major players in the energy space. About 20 million feet of Class A office space is available, and 3.5 million square feet of retail space. And so ultimately, really good baseline for us to work from to continue our presence, our economic presence and growth. So reimagining the energy corridor. Some folks say, well, hey, why are you doing that? And for me, well, one, I think there's several reasons. One, it's always good for an organization to take a pulse check and really understand where you are and really where you need to be and how to respond to that. But generally for us, I think there's some things that drive this effort on our part, and I'll explain what reimagining is all about. But for what drives it for us has a lot to do with, in some ways it's a Houston problem as well, but it has a lot to do with the presence of, or the definition of energy in Houston has always traditionally been oil and gas, which traditionally has always been very cyclical. And a lot of companies tend to hire based on the price of a barrel of oil. And so as oil went up, jobs increased. As oil went down, jobs decreased. And that always created a little bit of a challenge, I think, for Houston in general. Definitely a little bit of a shift is occurring in the energy space, much more of a commitment to energy transition, very much so debated in terms of what that looks like when that actually takes place. But what we do know is that it is happening, and that a lot of our employers are actually committed to this type of effort. And so we want to be sure that we're able to respond to the change in industry. In addition, for us, I think there's a couple of other factors that has impacted the energy corridor. One was Hurricane Harvey, and we'll get a little bit more into that, but definitely had an impact on the corridor and our ability, the perception that sort of hovered over the energy corridor, as well as the most recent unexpected pandemic that definitely has impacted most business districts, very similar to ours, and how people and companies may choose to work going forward. And so essentially, we came up with this effort to say, hey, we need to really think about how we operate as a district. How do we respond to the changing demand in the economics around the industry as well as Houston? We came up with 4 guiding principles that we thought would help guide this effort for us. And so one is destination, and ultimately the determination was made that we need to be more of a destination. Most people generally viewed us as a job center, and that was it, right? Place where you go to work and then you go home. And so how do we create the ability to be known as a destination, create more of an activation opportunity? Centrality was the second principle, leveraging the resources, the talents, the brand of some of our major employers and what's happening in the energy space to tell that story, to find dedicated resources, and to create opportunities to tell the story around energy and energy transition. Everything from partnerships and convening discussions to the opportunity to perhaps create demonstration ground concepts where we showcase energy technologies in the physical, within our boundaries. The third principle was infrastructure. Everybody understands that. Need good quality infrastructure to ultimately do this work. And then the fourth is capacity building. How over time do we build our organizational capabilities and strengths to execute on this work? And so in our reimagining process, we started off first with the look, the feel, the branding, the marketing, made a big switch that we're actually in the process of rolling out from the look in the brand to help tell our story and help to reflect the message that we were communicating, and decided to work on several projects that would help to lay the foundation and help to create that environment. So some of these projects help support the physical. It helps to support good infrastructure. So capital improvements plans, design standards to help us understand look, the feel of roadways, things of that nature, to strategic work around energy transition and connecting the two is ultimately what this is all about. And so won't go through all these projects, but it's a quick snapshot of some of the work that the organization is working on. Ultimately, the part that I really want to get to is talking about our relationship with the both addicts and Barkers. And so, of course, you all know that the reservoirs were built in the 1940s, and over time, that transition of the area eventually occurred. But originally, the area was really prairie land, and development in Houston was centralized downtown. And over time, that development started to grow, particularly in West Houston, much more in the 20th century. However, to some degree, the area had its own economic aspects that were there in terms of railroads and so on. And so the area was somewhat on the map, but it was always a place that was flood prone and definitely impacted, along with Galveston, city of Houston, by some major storms early in the 19th century. And so as a response to that, you guys probably know the story better than me, but federal government and local government got together and tried to come up with some solutions. The result of that were both addicts and Barker, and the unfortunate result of that was also additional infrastructure that never was actually built. However, as you saw on my map before, development, it came, and places like the Energy Corridor now sit and have our relationship with places like addicts and Barker. People's relationship with the reservoirs have always been a very positive one. In fact, when I talked to the core guys, David and Richard Long, we would always just talk about how most people don't really even know these reservoirs exist because they generally look at it for recreational purposes, which is always a positive thing. And for us on our end, we've always sold and told a great story about how much recreational use was actually available through the partnerships between the Corps and Harris County Precinct 3 that ran several of those recreational opportunities within the reservoirs. And so it was always a very interesting that dilemma to see people's perception of what the reservoirs really were. And so you can see that the reservoirs clearly do much more than that. And we've been on putting in a lot of effort to tell that story and communicate to our stakeholders that there's much more value to the reservoirs than just a recreational sense. But Hurricane Harvey, of course, brought to light and I think helped people to start to understand the purpose of the reservoirs, whether they liked it or not. I think they got some level of an education in terms of what the reservoirs were actually meant and designed to do. And so for us, the Energy Corridor was greatly impacted during Hurricane Harvey, and it did create and leave a perception on us that flooding was a challenge, for us. And so you can see that several thousand homes were damaged, over 11 million square feet of office space. Many of our larger employers were out of their buildings for a while. And we still have some level of impact of that storm today that we've been working through to deal with. And so on the opposite end of it, I think we've worked over time to try to transition from the impact of Hurricane Harvey and just talking about what it did to some actions related to how do we move this forward? How do we fix this? How do we better understand the needs of additional flood control infrastructure that may need to be added? And so we completely complement the Corps, Harris County Flood Control District, and all the other players who've been committed to identifying those solutions. The work that's being done through the Buffalo Bayou's Tributary and Resiliency Study. There's some movement with the North Canal Project. I believe it's in a design phase. And from our end, as I've shared earlier, we've made a commitment to really understanding and helping to tell the story of what the place that we sit as a business district, and really what this infrastructure around us means to not only the energy corridor, but to the greater Houston area. And so you can see from some of the statistics there that there's definitely been additional work that's been done post-Hurricane Harvey that's ultimately benefiting our stakeholders, benefiting our district to keep us safe. And there's ultimately additional work that's to come. And so we really appreciate that commitment from the Corps and their commitment to engaging us as an organization. I'll leave you with this. And for us, the energy corridor, it's a major economic hub in Houston. Like the rest of the region, we're dependent upon good flood resiliency, good flood control infrastructure, and ultimately, we as a business district are very much so in a position for future growth, very much so prime and ripe to take that level of work on. And for me, what it's really going to come down to for that success is going to be our continued engagement with the Corps. I think the larger continued engagement across the region, even at the federal level, to bring about implementation of some of these critical infrastructure pieces that we've been working through. And so ultimately, it's a challenge ahead of us, and I think it's a challenge that we have to tackle and ensure happens. And so I'll just say, again, just truly appreciate your commitment, Colonel Vale, as well as Scott and the flood control team. Andrew's been a big support as well. But ultimately, we're here, happy to support, want to be a resource, want to leverage every bit of our ability to support your efforts in bringing about a safer, more resilient Houston, Harris County, and Southeast Texas region. So thank you. I don't know if I have time for questions, but that is it.
Sir, we have one question, and I think you kind of addressed it in the presentation, but the question is, what is the energy corridor doing to slow, absorb, stop stormwater runoff before it floods our streams and federal reservoirs?
I might punt to Scott back there on the answer to that. I'll give a quick high level. I don't know if Scott wants to chime in, but I will say I know that the flood control district and the Corps has definitely been committed. Part of some of the statistics that I shared captured additional capacity added in watersheds that impact the energy corridor, including Cypress Creek, where there is and was some spillage or spillover into, I believe, Addicts and sometimes Barker watersheds. And so I believe there's a commitment there. I know there's a lot of resources being dedicated. And I will say that's probably the extent of my expertise. And I don't know if Scott wants to chime in.
Scott gets to go next. So.
Yeah, well, that's fair.
I'm going to do Byron's job a little bit, right? Because I'm going to do the segue between Elijah and Harris County Flood Control District to some extent, so that you can mentally prepare as I tee you up here. So what Elijah kind of presented was the challenge that we have with infrastructure, particularly in this large metropolitan area. The one slide that was probably most poignant to everybody involved in this is the slide that he showed the benefits that are achieved through the existing reservoir system that's already in place. When you look at federal involvement and or the solution set from a strict economic basis going forward to how do we reduce risk even further, you can't take credit for those benefits that are already provided with the existing infrastructure. So that's the challenge of this administration. That's the challenge of the day. That's the challenge of the future is, largely Addicks and Barker Reservoir are already providing $2.1+ billion and flood risk reduction benefits every single year. So anything we do is going to start off from a benefits to calculus ratio, benefit to cost ratio, very, very, very low, because we don't get to account for those existing benefits because that infrastructure is already in place. So that means we're dealing with the margins. We're dealing with the margins of threats and storm systems in a continuously changing environment. You say you've got all this undeveloped land, right? And that land over time will be developed. And that'll change the flood risk footprint across kind of the energy corridor specifically downstream of the reservoirs. At the same time, we have a whole bunch of upstream development, and that changes the drainage from the neighborhoods. Is the pluvial drainage that drains into the riverine system. It still only gets to the ocean through the bayous, right? So the more and more that we have drainage systems, they all end up in the bayous and trying to make their way to the ocean as fast as possible. The challenge we have, though, is how do we make a tangible argument when we're not going to have the cost-benefit argument? And that's where you've got to, where I think what we're trying to look at is expanding our understanding of the 4 ways we can qualitatively make those arguments. And the people that are going to help us on that is largely Harris County Flood Control District. And I think, Scott, you're presenting next. So come on up. Great presentation.